Right now, what families of the Fort Hood victims call a lingering injustice. A military jury sentenced Nidal Hasan to death last week for killing 13 people in the shooting rampage on a military base. Despite Hasan shouting, "God is great," in Arabic before firing on a group of soldiers heading to Afghanistan and telling the jury he believed he was on the wrong side of the war, the attack was tried as a case of workplace violence, not as an act of terror. Well, that's something that 3 Republican lawmakers want to change. Listen.
We've all been reluctant to do anything up to this point that would possibly benefit Major Hasan's defense.
This administration's workplace violence designation clearly favors political correctness over truth and justice.
Well, those lawmakers, including the very powerful Texas Senator John Cornyn, are pushing a bill that would reclassify the Fort Hood shootings as an act of terrorism. That opens the door for victims and their families to receive the same benefits and distinctions they would receive if they were injured or killed in combat, say on the fields of Afghanistan, for instance. Lise Wheel is a Fox News legal analyst. Doug Burns, a criminal defense attorney. They are with us now to talk about some of the legal ramifications here. Lise, it seems like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I mean, John, this always should have been classified as an act of terrorism. You laid out the case right there for why it should have been. It's really an insult to the victims in this case, the 13 people that were killed and the others, 32 some odd others that were injured. They should have got compensation. Now they will through this bill. It shouldn't have taken this long. It shouldn't have taken this far. It should have been tried as a terrorist crime that was not. It was tried as an act of violence in a workplace. I mean, come on. That's when somebody, ODs from aspirin and hits somebody. This is much more than that.
But, Doug, you say that this is trickier than it first seems to be.
I do, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it wasn't tried as a workplace violence case. It was tried as a murder case. But the reason it's a little bit tricky is because military criminal procedure caused a really bad result. And under military procedure, what happened was, but I agree with Lise, and you'll see why in 1 second. Under military procedure, there's no terrorism crime that you can charge in a court-martial, John. So the point is they were stuck with a straight murder prosecution. However, Lise and I discussed that under what we call the Assimilated Crimes Act, you could have theoretically added in some type of terrorism charge under the umbrella of the court-martial.
Exactly. Just attached it to what they were already charging. That would have been fine. I'm not sure why they didn't do it. Maybe it was political correctness. Maybe it was just being concerned about the actual charge. But I think Doug and I agree that could have been done. Also, administratively, an administrative court could have classified this as an act of terrorism. That would have brought these victims into it as well. So to say that there's no way to bring them in under the act of terrorism is just not true.
What about, though, Doug, if you charged Hasan with or if you called the victims, victims of terror, then does that taint the jury? I mean, that's one of the arguments that he would have been considered a terrorist in the eyes of the jury.
No, that's an extremely important point, and one military law expert and law professor was quoted widely in a number of different articles saying that exact point. And there's a specific term in military tribunals for that, which is that since military officers are presiding, you don't want any labels put on, such as terrorism, because it could. And Senator Cornyn, to his credit, specifically said, look, nobody wanted to do anything that could have helped his defense. So that was the main reason, back to your point, John, why we held off. And segueing ahead, if there's some way to correct it now so that the people are recognized as heroes and given benefits, I'm 1,000% for it, obviously.
Right, and that's what this bill does. It goes back and it reassigns a different classification so that they're going to get injury rehabilitation, they're going to get compensation for death, they're going to get life insurance, things that they deserve and should have gotten in the first place.
Well, and they'll be eligible for things like Purple Hearts.
Right.
Exactly.
Does either one of you, I mean, legal steps aside, does either one of you see any opposition in Congress to this kind of thing?
I don't.
Absolutely not, John. The point is, as I said earlier, not to be a broken record, you had a situation where military criminal procedure had to be followed, and it was. It caused a bad result, and it's time to correct it.
Yeah, they still could have done it the right way from the beginning, but that didn't happen, so now let's rectify it with this bill.
But what about changing the law so that this doesn't happen again?
Well, it wouldn't have needed to be, John. The law was already there. It just wasn't applied properly. I mean, I disagree with Doug on that point, which is that they could have attached this terrorism act right to all the other charges. If the jury didn't want to find him guilty on that, fine, throw it out. But it could have been attached from the very beginning or through an administrative channel. It could have been done.
If this does get through, then the victims, there are many survivors of that attack.
Absolutely.
The victims and the families of those who passed away are going to get some benefits that they deeply need and I, in my opinion, truly deserve. So
I agree, John, 100%.
Doug Burns, Lise Wheel, thank you both.
My pleasure.